Welcome back, MTGO here. Today we are going to be looking at a metagame breakdown for standard best of 3 traditional standard, but our focus is going to be on some off-meta decks that have popped up in various untapped data or MTGO leagues over the last couple days. I try to do these every so often. A lot of the top tier decks are still the top tier decks. So you can anticipate them there. We aren't going to cover like izzet prowess, which you can see on the screens representing about a quarter of the meta right now. Mono black mid-range. There's going to be no mice listed in these videos. Instead, we're going to be looking at some kind of different style decks that have put up some results in smaller numbers. So they're not guaranteed to be tier 1, but if you want to try out something new, get something a little bit more fresh, this is what it's intended for. Quick note, I am still getting over the flu, so I apologize in advance about my voice, and if there's a brief pause, it is just me muting to cough, so please bear with me as I try to keep getting content out while dealing with this. So we have untapped data here that we'll start off with, and then go to MTGO. All the deck lists will be linked in the video description. So jumping in, we have 5-color Reanimator, which is really Mardu Reanimator. Atraxa always likes complicating this. This one's at 63% win rate, 41 games, Diamond and Mythic rank, so at least Diamond rank in terms of that. We've seen these Rakdos versions of the deck before, relying just on Zombify, but this version does have also Rise of the Moth. So this is another reanimation effect. This one does put a finality counter on it, so downside there, but it does have the upside that you can mill it over through flashback, and then flashback. You have better sweepers, Day of Judgment, and Split Up in this version. You're putting cards in your graveyard with things like Fear of Missing Out, you have Tersa Light Shatter, you have Quag Feast, you have Overlord of the Balemark, and then we got some bangers on the top end. Throxa and Kronos, 6 mana, 6/6, Vigilance, Menace, Lifelink. When it enters or attacks, you exile 5 cards from your graveyard, then it's basically another reanimation effect tagged onto it. Traxa, Atali, as well as Big Valgavoth on the top end. Some lilies in here, a bunch of different removal options in the deck. Cease Desist, you're playing it actually pretty flexible. Against like Omni decks, you can use the Cease side. Against Desist, you use it against like Domain, anything, a lot of enchantments. No Witness, just as another sweeper. You can probably just play another Day of Judgment is probably a better call. There's potential downside here where you give them an ability to investigate. Temporary Lockdown, Quarry decks, any low to the ground decks. You have Lauren, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Brotherhood's End as cheap sweepers. This can also hit Quarries, which is nice, just choosing the artifact mode. A bunch of different removal options to kind of complement as well. One thing you might want in this sideboard is just Duress. You have a lot of removal in this deck. Cutting a couple pieces of removal in lieu of Duress in the kind of grindier matchups could be beneficial. So that's something you might want to consider. Azorius Enchantments or Azorius Eerie, so kind of the Duskmourn tribal deck. So you have cards with Eerie, so things like Entity Tracker, which draws you cards, obviously Innocence we've seen, and Curiosity. Silent Hall Creeper is basically an evasive creature, and you're kind of playing this similar for folks who played Historic to like the Auras deck. You have Sheltered by Ghosts, you have Shard Mage Rescue, you have Ethereal Armor, and then you have things that benefit you from playing the Auras. So Inquisitive Glimmer gives you a cost reduction on your enchantments. The Gremlin Tamer is like a young Pyromancer, but Eerie instead of instant sorceries. Bayflight gives you Hexproof for the turn, and then gives it flying, so it's another protection effect. So you basically have 6 protection effects, and then a bunch of different ways to draw cards between Curiosity, Innocence, and Entity Tracker. Your sideboard, you have sweepers for kind of creature mirrors, Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate, cheap counters in the gate. Knight of Grace against like black based decks, so cut down, go for the throats, Hexproof from it. So the mono black mid-range deck, they can't target it. Really strong, and then you just pump it up with a bunch of stuff. Disdainful Stroke for big mana decks, Requisition Raid, Artifact Enchantment Hate, really good against like Temporary Lockdown, and then Elspeth Smite for the aggressive decks. From MTGO leagues, we have 5-0 from Apple Chips. This is Dimir Crab. So we've seen kind of Simic Beanstalk. Imagine the Simic Beanstalk with Tolarian Terror as well as Eddymer Crab. But you're shifting the green for Beanstalk for black, so you have access to things like Overlord of the Balemark, actual removal. You can have Hand Hate after. But Overlord fills your graveyard, as well as Picklock Prankster, Cut Down, as cheap removal, Ops, Spell Pierce, Sleight of Hand, stock up in here to refill your hand. Quake Feast is more removal that mills you. Full Duress in the main board. So cheap ways to fill your hand, and then you're basically just cheating out 1 to 2 mana 5/5s in this deck, which is very strong. We have Disdainful Stroke as cheap counters, Ix Command as sweepers, just cheap disruption, strategic betrayal. Nice way to both kill creatures and exile graveyards, since you don't have Rest in Peace. Feed the Swarm deals with enchantments, Tishana's Tidebinder for activated abilities. Then go to Azorius Control, Fat Kokobo, 5/0. So we've seen Jeskai Control with the dragons, we've seen Azorius Omni. This is more just a dedicated blue-white control deck, which we haven't had in a bit of time. Full Bezas, Meringue River Regent, and a Hornlock Whale in the main, then just a bunch of removal. Get Lost, Ride's End, Soul Partition, bunch of cheap counters, Sweeper in Day Judgment, and then full temporary lockdown against the aggressive deck. Stock Up fills you up. Then Elspeth as another way to kind of fill the board. Also just like -3 can be reasonable against some of the bigger threats in the format. Sideboard, you have Change the Equation, cheap counter, red-green decks, very strong. High Noon against any of the kind of prowess decks. Conceals Flanker, Flash Threat that can deal graveyards. Tishana's Tidebinder, activated abilities. Negate for a cheap counter. Wiltleaf for the Hopeless Nightmare decks. Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate. Devout Decree deals with black and red permanents. And then Boonbringer Valkyrie against the aggressive decks. It's Baneslayer Angel at home. Moving on, we have Golgari Roots from MTG's 5/0. So this isn't kind of the infinite combo. It's like a value version of the deck. So Insidious Roots cares about cards leaving your graveyard. You get plant tokens. So you're not going like with Tyvar and stuff like this. Dredger's Insight gains you life when cards come out of your graveyard. In terms of creatures, play and then fills you up. Seed of Hope gains you some life, helps you dig for permanents. Soul Cauldron in there takes advantage of stacked abilities. Harvester of Misery is very good against prowess, sweeps up their board. Preacher, so it's kind of a mid-rangey Golgari deck with some backup plans. Haywire Might, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Canker Bloom, Artifact Enchantment Hate. The difference here is while this exiles and gains you life, it can only target non-creature enchantments. This one can hit creature enchantments. Scavenging Ooze for Graveyard Hate, Balemark fills you up, Molt Tender, Mill, or Mana. Disruptive Brood, Storm Brood is removal while also dealing with artifacts enchantments. Wasari Regent is value if you mill it over, or just a lifelink body. You can kind of stack it up, and then Llanowar Elves for ramp. Great Irrational City is also another way that you can make tokens from the creatures in your graveyard. Brawl Windcracker, 2 mana, 3/2 reach, enters, destroy target token an opponent controls. You deal prowess tokens. If there's anything, just making like a broad amount of tokens. Vivian works nice against the grindier matchups. Enchantments heavy. Hand Tate with Duress for like the more controlling matchups. You have Liliana, cheap removal throughout, and then Hostile Investigator for the mid-range battles. Moving on, Boros Monument, 5/0 from Blade Sounds. This is popped up here and there, so it's built around Monument's Endurance, which cares about you discarding cards. You have Guardian of New Benalia, which works really nicely with this because you can basically discard on demand on both turns. So at least the first instance of discarding will replace the card since you just choose draw a card. But it gives you card selection, can give you treasure. Phyrexian Dragon Engine can be played out of your graveyard, draws you more cards. Good thing to kind of discard. FOMO in here for extra combat, Screaming Nemesis, and then some Tursas plays with the discard effects. First Lightning, Soul Partition, Retorch Tower. You have Recommission, which can bring back notably not only just the creatures, but also bring back the monument itself, which is kind of cool. Helping Hand is kind of another reanimation effect, Sheltered by a Ghost for the aggressive decks. And a cool land hanging out here in the mana base, Mycospawn Gardens. So becomes target of non-token artifact you control with mana value X. So this basically would become a copy, more copies of Monument, and which is sweet. Pyroclasm, cheap sweepers, Story Evil, Artifact Enchantment Hate, big stuff. Lauren, Artifact Enchantment Hate. Soul Partition is more removal. Conceals Flanker for Graveyard Hate. High Noon for the Prowess decks. Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard decks. Chandra Spark Hunter just lets you attack at a different angle, where your opponent maybe is dealing with your graveyard, or has more removal for, say, the Monument Endurance. This lets you kind of grind them out, and then Voice to Victory for the instant speed decks. That is just the table. And then lastly, we have Rakdos Midrange, Oaf Mcnara. So kind of just good stuff Rakdos. So we have the Unholy Annex, which is usually a staple of these black mid-range piles. With red, you're getting copies of Tursa. We're getting Fear of Missing Out. So it's almost like the mono or the Rakdos Demons deck light from Pioneer. Preachers in here, Harvesters, Kosari. You have your big demons. Then a Braid's flexible since it can hit the Quarry Steel, which mono black could potentially struggle against. Torch the Tower in here. You have Anoint, Cut Downs, just a bunch of discard effects. 6 discard effects main, kind of mixed into the deck. Interesting to see 2 Sunspine links on the sideboard. You play 8 basics and 21 non-basics. So I guess against Domain, it gives you some reach. Strategic Betrayal, like we mentioned, Removal and Graveyard Hate. Liliana for the grindier matchups. Brotherhood's End as a sweeper. Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate. Gixaman sweeper along with Harvester. Lithomantic Barrage for like the Oculus decks. Chandra again in the grindier matchups. Stonebrain for combo hate. Another Braid, another Extend. That's it for the week. Let me know if any of these decks stand out to you, if you have any cool decks yourself that are doing well that are off meta, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for watching.